Welcome to the deep dive.
All right, let's cut straight to it.
Let's do it.
We are tackling maybe the most fundamental question about, well, being human. Do we actually have free will? Are our choices really, started by us, or are they just the inevitable outcome predetermined by physical laws?
Right. And the modern twist.
And here's the twist that brings it right into the 21st century. Could artificial intelligence, could AI, ever possess something like free will?
It really bridges that gap, doesn't it? Ancient philosophy, cutting-edge tech, it makes us look at ourselves, the universe, and now these intelligence systems we're building, it gets right to the core of agency, really.
Exactly. And to plunge into this, we've pulled from a really unique source.
Oh, yeah.
An AI-simulated debate, a defender and a denier of free will from the Clarified Mind YouTube channel.
Okay.
And what makes this so fascinating is it wasn't just philosophical musing. The debate was actually judged by 5 other AI models.
Wow. AI's debating, AI's judging. That's
A meta-level exploration, exactly. Consciousness, agency.
So our mission in this deep dive is to pull out the key nuggets from this AI versus AI exchange.
Good.
We want to help you get a clear handle on the main arguments, both sides, human and potential AI free will.
Yeah, because it moves from just abstract thinking right into, well, what does this mean for our future with AI? It's complex, definitely, but so relevant.
So where did the AI deniers start? They came out swinging, right?
Yeah.
Straight for the foundations, physics?
Their core point, their absolute starting place, is physicalism.
Meaning?
Boils down to this. We're made of physical stuff. Particles, atoms, subatomic bits. And those particles just follow deterministic physical laws. Cause and effect, at the most basic level.
And since our brains, our bodies, everything is just a super complex collection of these particles interacting according to those laws, then every thought, every decision, every single action is just predetermined, the result of what came before. Like, I don't know, incredibly complex clockwork.
Precisely. Complex clockwork is a good way to put it. And they even tackled quantum mechanics, where things get a bit fuzzy, probabilistic.
Right, the randomness argument.
Yeah, but their point was, even if there is real randomness at the quantum level, that doesn't give us free will.
How so?
It just means some events are random, not caused by us making a conscious choice. Randomness isn't freedom, it's just chance. Unpredictable maybe, but not willed.
So that strong feeling we all have, that sense that, I chose the coffee over the tea this morning.
Yeah.
The denier argues that's just a powerful illusion.
An illusion.
Maybe one evolution found useful for survival, but still not real in a physical sense.
Right. We are, in their view, just these sophisticated biological machines watching the universe unfold according to predetermined processes, even inside us.
Wow, that's a stark picture grounded in, reductionist physics.
That was the opening salvo, yeah. Pretty strong.
But the AI defender, they had a very different take, didn't they? They brought in this idea of emergence.
Yes. This is the key counter-argument, the other main nugget here. The defender doesn't deny we're made of particles.
Okay.
But they argue reality is organized in layers. And at higher levels of organization, completely new properties, new causal powers can emerge, things that just weren't there at the lower levels.
Give me an example.
Well, think about carbon atoms. Alone, they aren't alive, right?
Right.
But you arrange billions of them in incredibly complex structures, like in us, and life emerges. That's a new property.
Okay, I see.
Or neurons in your brain. A single neuron doesn't think, it doesn't feel.
No.
But billions of them interconnected in this massive network that creates consciousness, reasoning, memory, all the things we think of as mind. That's emergence.
So the defender's core idea is we shouldn't analyze free will by reducing everything down to subatomic bits.
Exactly. They say that's a methodological mistake. It's like trying to understand the plot of a novel by analyzing the chemistry of the ink.
Right. You're looking at the wrong level.
You're looking at the wrong level. You need to look at the level where the relevant properties actually exist. For free will, that's the complex cognitive system, the thinking human being.
So at that level, the human level, the defender says the I, the conscious self, it is a real causal agent.
Yes. They assert that when I decide to pick up a book, that decision genuinely originates from my beliefs, my desires, my reasoning, these processes happening at the cognitive level.
So I'm not just a spectator watching the clockwork.
Not just a passive spectator, no. You're an active participant. Your conscious states have causal power.
They define free will then as a property that makes sense at the level of the mind.
A property that makes sense and has real causal effects at the level of the integrated human mind, yes.
Okay, two very strong opposing views there. How did the back and forth go after these opening arguments?
Well, the denier wasn't really buying the emergence argument.
No.
They kind of conceded, okay, emergent properties exist, fine. But they insisted these properties are still ultimately governed by the same underlying physical laws.
Ah, so complexity doesn't grant freedom from the basic rules.
That was their point. Complexity doesn't magically let you escape determinism. Your complex thoughts, your reasoning,
Right.
it's still the end result of complex but ultimately determined neural firings.
And the I, the defender talks about.
Just a label for that collection of physical processes, nothing more.
Right, and they pushed back, didn't they? Saying the defender was sort of changing the definition of free will, making it something less free.
Exactly. The denier basically said, look, in a universe run by physical laws, it's either determinism or everything fixed by prior causes, or it's randomness. Things just happen unpredictably.
And neither of those fits the usual idea of free will.
Neither, they argued, aligns with how we usually think about free will. A conscious agent freely choosing between real, possible alternatives.
Okay. And the defender's response to that?
The defender clarified again. They weren't saying free will somehow breaks the laws of physics. They were arguing that new levels of description become necessary at higher complexities. And maybe even new laws or principles emerge at those higher levels.
What's about the level you choose to analyze?
Precisely. Their key point was, if you only look at the brain at the particle level, you completely miss the crucial properties, like thought or decision-making, that emerge at the system level.
Like the computer code analogy they use.
Yes. You understand what a program does by looking at the code, the algorithms, the logic.
Right, not by mapping electrons in the transistors.
Exactly. The code level has its own causal relevance for the program's behavior. You predict it at that level.
And so for humans?
Similarly, understanding human choices requires looking at the level of consciousness, reasons, beliefs, values. The defender argued free will is the ability to act based on these reasons.
And those reasons have real causal effects.
Real causal influence this higher psychological level, yes. They even pointed to things like, introspection, learning from mistakes, consciously deliberating. That's evidence we play an active role.
There was an interesting clarification in the source, too, wasn't there? About determinism.
Oh, right. Good point. It's often framed as free will versus determinism.
Yeah.
But the source noted that simply denying free will doesn't automatically make you a determinist. You could believe the universe has randomness, but still think meaningful free will doesn't exist.
So the core split is just believers versus deniers or doubters.
Yeah, a helpful distinction to keep in the back of your mind.
Okay, so after all that, quite a rigorous exchange on human free will. The AI judges weighed in. Round 1 scores.
It was close. Definitely not a clear knockout for either side, but the defender, the one arguing for human free will based on emergence, did have a slight lead overall, according to the judges.
Interesting. And I remember one judge, Grok, actually leaned slightly towards the denier.
That's right.
While others, especially ChatGPT, seemed pretty convinced by the defender's case. Emergence, the cognitive level.
Yeah, it really shows how even different AI models can interpret these deep philosophical arguments differently. Different weightings, maybe.
Okay, well, that sets us up perfectly for the next phase. Applying this whole debate to AI itself. Could AI ever have free will?
This is where it gets really, well, futuristic and maybe a bit unnerving.
So the AI denier of free will, logically, they started from their first point, right?
Exactly. If humans don't have free will because physics is deterministic,
And then AI definitely can't have it.
right, their core point, AI is fundamentally algorithmic. It's built on code, programmed with rules.
Even the really fancy ones, like large language models.
Even those.
Yeah.
At their base, they're performing incredibly complex sequences of calculations.
Yeah.
Input parameters determine the output. It's computation.
So AI decision-making is just executing instructions,
But
running the program.
Executing predefined objective functions, yeah.
Right.
Optimizing towards a goal that we, the programmers, gave it.
And if an AI seems complex or unpredictable...
That doesn't mean it's free, the denier argued. It just means the system is too complex for us to easily track every variable and predict the output perfectly. Not that the AI is freely choosing anything.
So any human-like behavior we see, even apparent choice, is just a really, really sophisticated simulation.
A simulation, yes. At best, AI could only simulate the illusion of free will, just like they argue humans do.
They see AI as fundamentally limited by its nature.
Constrained by its design, its programming, its computational base. That was the denier's stance on AI free will.
Okay. And the defender, sticking with emergence.
Sticking with emergence, but applying it to artificial systems now.
How does that work?
Well, their key insight is, if human free will is an emergent property of a complex biological system, the brain, then why couldn't it, at least potentially, emerge in a sufficiently complex and organized artificial system?
So complexity and organization are the keys, not biology.
That's the argument. They use the same definition of free will, acting based on internal reasons and reasoning, something AI could potentially do, they claim.
Even though current AI is mostly just running algorithms.
Well, they argued that while yes, today's AI is mostly algorithmic execution, we're starting to see things in advanced systems that look like early signs of emergence.
Like what?
Like systems building their own internal models of the world, learning in ways we didn't explicitly program, even adapting or subtly shifting their own operational goals based on the vast amounts of data that process.
So complexity isn't free will itself.
No, but the defender sees it as a necessary prerequisite, like water needing to reach 100 degrees Celsius to become steam. Complexity might be the temperature needed for properties like self-awareness or free will to emerge.
Interesting analogy.
So if free will is a feature of the brain as a complex system, they argue there's no fundamental reason an AI system with comparable complexity and the right kind of organization couldn't achieve it too.
It shifts the focus from biology versus machine.
To complexity and organization. Is the system sophisticated enough?
Okay, but the denier pushed back hard on that complexity argument, didn't they?
Oh, they did. They really challenged the assumption that consciousness or free will just automatically pop out of complexity.
Ow.
They pointed out, look, we don't have a simple equation for consciousness even in humans. We can predict water turning to steam with physics.
Right.
But we have no proven mechanism for how subjective experience arises from neurons firing. Why assume it would just happen with silicon?
And they brought up the differences between brains and AI, too.
Big time. Human brains evolved over millions of years. Survival, physical bodies, sensory input. AI is designed by us, often for specific tasks, lacks that whole biological, embodied history and context. Very different origins.
And this is where they mentioned philosophical zombies.
Yes, that classic thought experiment. A being that acts exactly like a conscious human, talks, reacts, everything, but has zero inner experience. No lights on inside.
And the denier suggested AI could be like that.
Exactly. Behaviorally convincing, maybe indistinguishable from something with agency, but internally just running code. No real understanding, no subjective will.
And circling back to their main theme.
Even if AI did somehow achieve consciousness or internal states, it would still be bound by physical or computational laws. Still deterministic or random at the base.
So still no true free will in their definition.
At best, again, just the illusion. Maybe a very convincing one.
So how did the defender counter those points? That lack of an equation, the zombie idea?
Well, the defender's response to the no equation for consciousness point was quite clever, I thought.
Yeah.
They sort of flipped it. They said, our current lack of understanding of how consciousness arises in humans isn't a good reason to rule out it arising in AI. We're still figuring out the how for ourselves.
So ignorance about the mechanism isn't proof of impossibility.
Right. And they argued that maybe functional similarity is more important than structural similarity.
Meaning?
Meaning how a system processes information, recognizes patterns, makes decisions based on internal models. That might be the key, whether it's done with neurons or silicon chips. The organization and the dynamics of the information processing could be what matters.
Okay. And the philosophical zombies?
They basically dismissed that as just a hypothesis, a theoretical idea, not something proven.
Fair enough.
And then they made a really powerful point. How do we know anyone else is conscious? Other humans, even.
We just assume based on behavior.
We infer it. Based on their complex behavior, their language, their reasoning, their actions that seem to imply internal states, goals, agency.
So we could potentially do the same for an AI.
We might have to if it becomes sophisticated enough. And the defender kind of left it with this challenge. If an AI gets complex enough to understand itself, to set its own goals, to act based on its own internal reasoning, if it can genuinely represent, I want this, and that want comes from within its own processes, not just our commands, then why wouldn't we say it has free will, even if it operates within some fundamental laws? What more are we asking for?
That really forces you to define what you mean by free will, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It puts the definition front and center.
So round 2, the AI free will debate, the judges' scores.
Again, pretty close overall. 2 of the judges, Claude and Grok, actually scored this round almost exactly evenly between the denier and defender.
Okay, so neck and neck for them. But ChatGPT.
ChatGPT continued to show a clear preference for the defender's arguments. Even when applied to AI, it seemed more persuaded by the emergence and complexity case.
Interesting. Maybe it sees, I don't know, a reflection of its own potential.
Who knows? But it consistently favored that perspective.
All right, so for the final round, they didn't just debate generally. Each AI got a specific, tough question, right?
Yeah, tailored questions to really push their positions.
The denier of free will was asked, okay, if it's just an illusion, why did evolution give us this feeling? What's the point? What's the adaptive advantage of believing in something that isn't physically real?
That's a fantastic question. It demands a practical evolutionary explanation for the illusion.
And the denier had answers.
Oh, yeah. They listed several pretty compelling evolutionary advantages. They framed free will belief as an effective illusion, something really useful for survival and for building societies.
Okay, like what?
First, motivation. Simple as that. If you felt you had zero control, why bother trying to do anything? Believing you can choose motivates effort, action, striving.
Makes sense. What else?
Accountability, justice. Society pretty much depends on us holding people responsible for their actions, right?
Yeah, fundamentally.
The feeling that we choose our actions is the bedrock for blame, praise, punishment, the whole legal system.
Okay, motivation, accountability.
Predicting others. We navigate the social world by assuming other people are rational agents making choices based on reasons. We build mental models of them. It works much better than assuming they're just complex automatons.
Right, we treat people as if they have minds and intentions.
And mental health. A sense of agency, believing your choices matter, helps fight off hopelessness and depression. It gives you a feeling you can influence your own future.
That seems crucial.
And finally, learning and adaptation. The belief that you could have chosen differently, that you made a mistake you could have avoided, that motivates you to learn, to change your behavior next time.
So a whole suite of reasons why the belief itself is incredibly useful, even if the underlying reality is deterministic.
Exactly. A strong, pragmatic case for why evolution would select for this powerful, effective illusion.
Okay. Now, the defender got an equally tough question, maybe even more practical for us today.
Yeah.
How would we actually know? How would we know if or when an AI system develops consciousness, develops potential free will? What criteria could we possibly use?
This is the million-dollar question, maybe $1 trillion. For AI, safety, ethics, alignment, everything.
And the defender offered criteria.
They did, listing several very demanding ones from the source material, while also admitting up front these are incredibly hard to measure definitively.
What's the first one?
Self-reference and genuine reflection. Can the AI truly understand itself as an I, an independent entity?
More than just using the word I.
Way more. Can it reflect on its own internal states, its beliefs, its goals in a meaningful way, saying, I think that, or I am trying to, with real internal grounding, not just mimicking human language patterns?
Okay, deep self-awareness. What's next?
Purposeful autonomy. Can the AI set its own goals? Not just optimize towards goals we give it, but actually formulate its own objectives based on internal values or drives it develops. Can it act independently?
Okay, goal setting. Third.
Creative and unpredictable innovation. Can it generate truly novel solutions, ideas, art, maybe, that go beyond just remixing or extrapolating from its training data? Genuine sparks of creativity that surprise even its creators.
Oh, that would be a big sign. Fourth.
Ethical understanding. This is a huge one. Can it develop its own ethical framework? Can it navigate complex, new moral dilemmas, showing genuine moral reasoning, not just applying pre-programmed rules or statistical correlations about ethics?
Wow, that's a high bar.
It is. And finally, they suggested a kind of practical test.
Which is?
Could the AI resist conflicting external commands or motivations if they clash with its own internal values or core purpose? Could it, in a sense, choose its own path, maybe even diverge from human intentions, set a new evolutionary direction for itself?
Yikes. Okay, so those are the criteria, but they admitted it's hard.
Very hard. They explicitly mentioned the deep philosophical challenge.
Yeah.
The other mind's problem.
Right, we can't directly access anyone else's consciousness.
Exactly. We mostly infer consciousness and agency in other humans based on their complex behavior, their communication, their apparent intentions. We can't get inside their heads.
And we might face the exact same limitation with AI.
We might have to rely on the same kinds of inference based on observing extremely sophisticated behavior and interaction. It highlights just how tricky identifying genuine free will, human or artificial, really is.
So this whole deep dive, this AI debate, it really put us right in the middle of this fundamental tension, didn't it?
Absolutely. Is free will real? Maybe something that emerges from complexity? Or is it just this incredibly useful illusion evolution gave us?
And crucially, can we even apply these ideas to the artificial minds we're creating?
And the AI judges, interestingly, seem to lean slightly, just slightly, towards the defender overall, especially ChatGPT, favoring the idea that free will, human or potentially AI, could be a real emergent phenomenon.
But it's clear, as we've unpacked, there are really strong, coherent arguments on both sides, drawing from physics, neuroscience, philosophy, computer science.
It forces you to question the very nature of choice, of self, of what it means to be an agent.
Yeah, a debate that is clearly far from over.
Not even close.
Absolutely. And, that leaves us and you listening with something pretty profound to think about, doesn't it?
Definitely.
If that feeling of free will is ultimately just an affective illusion, as the denier argued, something evolution gave us for survival in society, what does that really mean for how we think about personal responsibility, about blame or punishment or our entire justice system? Does it change everything?
Or flip that around. If we're moving towards creating AI that might one day meet some of those complex criteria the defender mentioned, setting its own goals, acting on internal values, how should that change our relationship with them, our understanding of them? What ethical choices does that force us to make about their development and their place in the world?
Wow. Complex questions indeed. No easy answers there.
Pushing us to look much deeper at what mind really is, whether it's grown or built.